So pretty much the podcast, I really just talks about three core aspects, which is wealth, health, relationships. I always tell people that, look, I don't know too much about relationships and health, but I'm the wealth specialist. But I think with all those three things, when they come together, people have an amazing life, but we help people with nothing great comes easy. And once you do something consistently, you just generally learn better ways to do it.
The thing about podcasting is the fact that someone you've never spoken with, like ever in your life, you just hop on a call and you're having a conversation. How it happens, I don't know. Like this stuff doesn't happen in real life, but for some reason it happens in podcast, and I don't know
Yeah.
why and how. The funny thing about podcasting is that it's one of those platforms that it can be anything you want.
I think the good thing about podcasting is you just learn to articulate yourself a lot better. And, if you are very confident doing it in front of a camera with another person and doing it over and over again, once you're then in, I'll just say, business situation, it's a lot easier to say, okay, well, this is what I do, this is how I help people.
Hello and welcome to my podcast story, the show where I go behind the mic with podcast creators to uncover the real stories behind their shows. I am your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and every week I sit down with podcasters from around the world, explore how they create, what inspires them, challenges they face, and how they are making their mark, whether it's for passion, profit, or both. If you've ever wondered how podcast hosts manage their workflow, what keeps them going, or what it really takes to build a podcast that resonates, you are in the right place. So sit back, get inspired, and let's dive into today's episode. Today on my podcast story, I am joined by Victor Idoko, the wealth strategist, author, and host of the Elevate Your Wealth podcast. Victor isn't just another finance expert. He's on a mission to help high-performing professionals and small business owners simplify their finances and build lasting wealth with real, actionable strategies. With a CFA under his belt and a heart for personal growth, Victor blends mindset and money in a way that makes success feel not just possible, but practical. Let's go behind the mic and hear the story of how Victor is helping others elevate both their wealth and their lives.
Tell us your name, the name of your podcast, and what your podcast is about.
Yeah, so my name is Victor Idoko. I'm a financial planner and wealth manager in Australia, and my podcast is called Elevate Your Wealth. So pretty much the podcast, I really just talks about three core aspects, which is wealth, health, relationships. I always tell people that, look, I don't know too much about relationships and health, but I'm the wealth specialist. But I think with all those three things, when they come together, people have an amazing life, but we help people with wealth planning, building a little bit of wealth and ensuring their money is working as hard as they can for.
Yeah. Wow. How old is your podcast?
Yeah, so I've been running the podcast for just under, it's like 6 months now, 8 months, about 6 to 9 months-ish.
Wow. Like last two guests I've had so far, they started their podcast this year. Okay, but yours
Okay.
you started last year. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I started mine last year.
So when will be the 1 year anniversary of the podcast?
I think we started late August, early September, around then. Yeah, so
Okay.
which should be good. So now really trying to get the message out there that, look, the podcast is there, and look, I've been jumping on lots of people's podcasts as well, just to talk about a little bit about myself, and also talk about the book that I've written as well. So I think part of the idea of the podcast is to share as much financial literacy as can be shared, so people really understand, okay, what should we do, what they should be doing about your finances, and really understand, okay, if they need help, who can help them as well. And I think the book as well is a very key aspect to that, because it really gives lots of people lots of confidence as to what they should be thinking about and how they should really navigate their money habits.
Yeah, I'm curious. Why did you start your podcast?
So the podcast was started just because I think lots of people need to get good information from somewhere, and especially around wealth and wealth building. So it was really just to give lots of financial literacy to people out there, so they really understand, okay, where can they get some good information? What does that look like? And for us to share all the knowledge that we have as well. So I've been studying for the last 16 years, very qualified in that wealth aspect, so economics, finance, accounting, all that. So it's just a platform to share the knowledge we have.
I'm kind of curious. You could have gone with creating a blog. You could have gone with maybe making a YouTube channel, or maybe becoming a YouTuber. Why a podcasting?
Yeah, so I think with podcasting, I think that's the highest level of personal interaction you can give someone. because you're hearing you, they're seeing you, and they really get to understand, okay, what's this person about? While as in a blog, they don't really see you, and they don't hear you as well. So it's a little bit different. And then I think the YouTubing and podcasting probably very similar because we post our videos now on YouTube, so maybe we are YouTubers if you can put it that way. So,
Yeah.
but those two are very similar. But I think the podcast really gives lots of personal value, or rather, really shows your personality to people, which I think people really need to understand, and then use. Rather, people really need to understand, and then that way they can actually feel more confident around you and really trust you, I guess.
Yeah. Quickly, I just want to like asking me questions just for us to get to know your podcast, and then I'll start asking you questions regarding your story
Sure.
podcast. You mentioned that you have a YouTube channel. Did you start the YouTube channel alongside the podcast, or it's something you incorporated along the way?
Yeah, so the YouTube channel actually started before the podcast, because when we give financial advice to people in Australia, it was a good idea just to share some client stories as well, and also share how we can help people. So the YouTube channel actually started first before we then jumped into the podcast.
How's the YouTube channel doing? What's it looking like?
Yeah, so look, in terms of that, look, we have lots of videos out there. We don't have as many followings, and look, it's just, the thing with finance in Australia is very tailored, and Australia is not that huge compared to, other nations. However, look, I still think we're fairly new. It's not my full-time job. I'm a financial planner and a wealth manager, so I definitely don't look at that as a yardstick for success. Success to me is helping my clients and ensure, my clients understand what we're doing and how we're helping them. So
you mentioned that you're a full-time financial planner. This podcast, I'm guessing it came after the book.
No, the book came after the podcast. But look, I was already writing the book before I started the podcast. So I think it depends on how you look at it. The book was published after the podcast, but I started writing the book before.
Okay, boy. So you're already creating the book. Then you're like, okay, it would be nice. Let me start a podcast while you were developing or writing the book.
Correct.
Yeah.
For different reasons. The book and the podcast, look, they all give financial literacy, but I didn't start the podcast because of the book.
Okay. So what's the title?
It's called 7 Basic Wealth Strategies.
Okay.
Yeah, people can find that on. Sorry, you go.
I was thinking you're going to say elevate your wealth.
No. So I think that the book idea was just 7 basic things people need to know to understand how they can build wealth. It's definitely can be gotten anywhere in the world because it's on Amazon, it's on Audible, and it's just 7 things that people really need to consider to say, okay, yes, I'm doing the basic things for my wealth and finances.
Yeah. Is this podcast, does it connect to it? Wait, I want to understand, do you do the financial planning as a business, right?
Yes, so financial planning is my business, and that's what I do full.
Okay. This podcast, does it connect to your business, or it's just something that's on its own?
It definitely connects to my business. So all what we do is around financial plannings, around wealth management, around money management. So everything is connected. I'm an expert in that field, but the podcast is definitely aligned to that. Look, we do bring guests on the podcast, and those guests have different other specialties. Okay, so for example, we might work closely, or rather, we do work closely with accountants or mortgage brokers or estate lawyers or commercial lawyers, and these people come onto the podcast to explain what they do and how they can help our guests.
Wow. Yeah, that's so you do solo episodes or a mix of both solo and interviewing of guests?
Yeah, so we do solo and mix. I think that the solo ones are good because then I can talk and dive deeper into financial planning strategies or just money management in general. And the one with the guests as well, we can explore the ideas that really tie into financial planning, but I may not be the expert in that field. For example, a business owner might need a good commercial lawyer, and how does that translate into having the right protection in place, like things like buy-sell insurance and, buy-sell financial agreements. So that's why we need other guests to come and educate people.
Yeah. I mean, it's a wholesome plan. You just the kind of like you're the chef putting everything together and just cooking the meal for your listeners.
Yeah, a bit. So yeah, you can definitely look at it as our doctor, however you want to look at it. So I kind of bring people together to help clients get to their financial goals and objectives.
Yeah, it's been around about 8 months now. I guess the question I want to ask is now, when you started your podcast, you kind of had these expectations. There were reasons why you started it, and it's about 8 months now.
Correct.
How's the podcast doing compared to the purpose you had, not compared to other things, but just what you had in mind when you started?
Yeah, so it is accomplishing the purpose, which is getting good and quality information out there. Okay. Our reach is not as much as I expected. And so if I was to do this again, I'll definitely plan better as to, how to go further with the reach. And, we're learning that as we speak to other people in the podcast industry as well. There's all these things, there's always a strategy to get to where you want to go to. And we just didn't have that right strategy to get us as far in terms of reach. But that's something we're working on now.
Yeah, I'm curious. You said our reach is not as expected. It's not as expected. So I'm curious, what was the reach that was expected, and what is the reach now?
So look, I expected would have a few thousand views for each video. I expected, to definitely have even some videos get into a few million, because what we speak about is very relevant, so but it hasn't got in there. So
Okay, okay, you talked about videos. Okay, what about on the audio side? What are the expectations?
good, very good question. So my team manages that. So I actually haven't looked at the numbers on the audio side, so I actually
Oh,
can't say. So, but I do know we're on Spotify and all that, and I'm not too sure how many people have actually listened to that on Spotify. I've been caught here without looking at the numbers, so I actually don't know what
yeah.
the numbers are there.
Okay, but have you ever looked at the numbers?
For my audio, no, not the audio, but the video, yeah.
You've never
And
looked
because I
at
have a
the
team,
numbers. Wow.
no,
Wow.
because I have a team who manages that for me,
Yeah,
so
because
they
the
actually
reason I wanted to ask that question was I wanted to know, I wanted to say, okay, well, last time you looked at it, what was the number? Since you've not looked at the number, I guess that question doesn't really fit.
No, it doesn't fit, so I think this is really relevant for people that want to grow. Some things are not. Some things should be delegated out, so that's one thing I wanted to delegate out, because my plate is full with lots of other things I have to do. Like I still need to see clients, I still need to run the business. So I haven't really paid too much attention to that. But I'll probably get my team to send me the numbers so I can actually see what that is
Yeah,
over time.
how it's doing. Yeah. You got the idea to start a podcast. Can you still remember how the idea started, or it was more? There's some certain persons they have these aha moments where like, yeah, and then other people it's just more like it's a developmental process. It's more like they can't really point out to say, okay, this is where the idea came from. But they're like, eventually I did this stuff, but I think it was more like 2-3 years of different stuff coming together and leading me to doing this thing. But other people they can say, yeah, this was this reason. This is the exact reason. This was the exact place I got the idea from to start my podcast.
Yeah, so I got it from a conference. So I went for a conference in
Wow.
Vancouver. It was a financial planning conference, and they talked about how you need to build your personal brand, and actually how you need to ensure that personal brand is built around something that works for you when you're not there. Good thing
Yeah.
about podcasts, or the good thing about these assets you put out is, people can watch that anytime, and you're not actually doing any other personal exertion. So that was the trigger for me to, okay, yes, now it's time to actually start a podcast. I wish they had told us about planning and, ensuring that you make time to ensure you have your strategy right to get as much reach. But look, to me, everything's a learning process, right? And it's not my main business or source of revenue, so that's fine.
Yeah, I mean the sweet thing about podcasts is that when you tell people that you have a podcast and they go check out your podcast, I think for me the first two things the podcast should reflect is that one, you know what you're saying, and not necessarily you know what you're saying, but like you have this right attitude towards it, like it's something serious. When someone listens to you, they know that okay, this guy is not, he didn't come here to play. Of course, it's good to have fun with doing what you do, but they know that okay, this is not just the child's play. And then second thing, they need to see that you're active. Like you just post last 6 months and then you disappear. And if you stick with something for 8 months, 1 year, 2 years, like you're serious with that thing. Like I don't know what other metric we're going to use to know if somebody's serious, but to stick with something for 2 years, I mean, it just shows that you're serious, pretty serious with this thing, and that itself kind of elevates and builds your authority in a way.
Yeah, that's true. Look, nothing great comes easy, and once you do something consistently, you just generally learn better ways to do it. So that's the good thing about doing something over a long period of time. So, and we have learned a lot as to what podcasting or videos look like, and I think that's probably why I'm just very comfortable when I jump on the podcast. I kind of know what it's about and what should be done and all of that.
Yeah, the sweet thing about podcasting for me is that it's more like it's both ways, especially if you're doing an interview podcast, is that you get to build your one-to-one network and then you also get to build your one-to-many network. Now, of course, the listeners take some time to grow, but you get guests on your podcast. That way you chatting with them for maybe an hour. I don't know how long your podcast is, but you
Mm.
basically building your, your network in the industry, probably in Australia. I don't know how where you get your guests from, but you building that network one to one, all in the name of I have a podcast.
Yeah, so
And
and yes, you mentioned a very good point there because when you sit down with someone for an hour and then you ask questions, you generally talk about things that you haven't spoken about before. So with lots of my guests, they have been people that I've known for, for a few months to a few years, but we still learn a lot about each other that we didn't know before that. So it's been interesting. It's been very good. And I think podcasting is very interesting because when you sit down with someone and then you have a good conversation and then you just get to know them, it's a good feeling.
yeah, honestly, yeah. Usually for me, for me, the thing about podcasting is the fact that someone you've never spoken with, like ever in your life, you just hop on a call and you're having a conversation. How it happens, I don't know. Like this stuff doesn't happen in real life, but for some reason it happens in podcasts, and I don't know
Yeah.
why and how. I still don't understand it. Like if someone comes to me like in real life, like I'm like, dude, well, like what's going on here? Like, will you calm down?
And,
Yeah,
and, and yes, you make a very good point because we could have crossed paths and not said hi, but here we are
yeah,
talking now, and because
yeah.
we've just been connected. And I think it's just the way the world is going, right? People are very comfortable to do things online or trust a platform. Think about things like Uber. If you think about that 20 years ago, people said, "No, I'm not going to jump in the car with a stranger." But I think that's the direction the world is going. So it's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of the things that kind of stood out when you were talking about your podcast was the fact that you have a team that handles it for you. Now, I'd love for us to go into the team aspect, like really. But before we even get started, I want my listeners to know, like, how much you spend on your podcast currently. So the softwares, the tools, and probably the team. I don't know. Is that number something that you can easily give?
So, okay, I'll give you a range because it depends a lot as to but that range goes from, about $300 to about 1,200 per podcast. So it just depends on what is involved in that podcast. So,
Wow.
yeah. So, and I guess it depends on, do you have a studio where you're doing your podcast? Is it very professional? All those things are very relevant.
Okay,
Why do you seem
wait.
surprised?
Wait. I'm really surprised because maybe when you explain the stuff behind those numbers, then maybe it will make sense for me. $300 to $1,000. Let's say let's say $1,000 plus or minus, right, per
Yes.
podcast episode. You how often do you release episodes?
We release episodes one every fortnight.
Okay, that's in a month. That's two. That's for you. Assuming
Correct.
it's for 4 weeks. Okay, so that's about $600 to $2,000 in a month. So what goes into that number you called? Are you getting a studio? What is happening?
Yeah, so our podcasts are very professional. We're in the studio. We have a team behind the studio helping us navigate the podcast as well. Like if you jump on YouTube, you can see from the videos that is a professionally done podcast. There'll be a team that then edits that at the back end. There'll be a team that'll cut that into different reels as well. And what else? And yeah, so there'll be a team that'll ensure the guests are there on time. Several things going to go.
Okay, now it makes sense. Now it makes sense. Because then I was like,
Okay.
ooh, yeah, it makes sense. But probably why I see the reason. I see the
What do others spend on your podcast? Maybe I'm spending too much.
we no, we can't compare others. Others, most of them they manage their show by themselves, so they
Okay.
don't necessarily count
Interesting.
their labor or their time cost. They just count the amount they spend on the software and physical products. But by the time
I
you
see.
outsource that job to someone else, then you have to count the time, the labor cost, and then it's the number goes pretty high. You get. But if for example that you were managing this podcast yourself, you see that what you probably need to be doing is you'll be spending on the softwares and all those things that you need, but you won't be doing editing, you mean all those parts. But those are the parts that is bringing those $300 to $1,000, and it makes sense now.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, look, as I said, depends on the professionalism you want for the podcasts.
Yeah,
In Australia, lots of people who are getting financial advice, want to see something that is professionally done and
Yeah.
I rather spend my time with clients and not worrying about how do I edit, what software do I
Yeah.
get, and all that. So I think a big thing would be the studio as well. So just
Yeah.
hiring the studio to actually shoot those podcasts.
Yeah. I mean, it's business. You're a business. There's a level you get up to the way you're like, okay, an hour of my time is what's like maybe $500 or $100. You're like, okay, how much does it take to get someone to do podcasts and stuff like that? You're like, no, why would I spend an hour of my time when I could actually spend that time with a client instead of doing that, I'm recording an episode when I can actually pay someone less than amount to do them. So from that perspective, it makes business sense to just spend the money and do that. Other than that, if you're probably not making any money, if you don't have a business, don't go and be spending 300 to $1,000 recording your podcast. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah. So look, there are lots of cheaper ways to do things. So totally understand that.
yeah. Have you ever gotten a message from your list?
Yeah, so we do get messages. So we do get people asking questions or clarifying whatever was spoken about. So we do get lots of that from time to time, especially on different platforms. So look, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube. So we do get comments from time to time. Some comments are very just interesting to just read. Like there was one we had because we had a commercial lawyer, and then she was talking about how we shouldn't be using ChatGPT to run contracts, and I totally agree. Sorry, to write contracts. But the listener was like, well, you just do with ChatGPT and you're done. The thing with contracts, especially from the legal perspective, the different layers, it's just like someone doing something every day for the last 5 years. ChatGPT is not at that level to ensure that the intricacies and the different layers are all covered in that contract. So
Yeah,
it's just interesting because you get to see the way lots of people think, and you get to then try explain to them as best as you can why things are done the way they are.
yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of makes sense because it's just not. It's not the fact. How do I explain that? It's not the fact that you can't do it with ChatGPT. It's just the fact it's more like the risk factor of not doing it well is so high when it comes to matters like that you might as well just get a professional to.
Yeah. So lots of things, like, yes, the risk factor really comes into play when something bad happens. For
Yeah,
most people, I'd say only 5 to 10% of people would run into issues with contracts long term. But the other thing as well is Chat GPT, because I go to Chat GPT sometimes and ask it questions about financial planning, and when it comes up with some answer, I'm like, no, that's wrong, that's totally wrong. And then sometimes it replies like, yeah, it says, you're absolutely right, sorry for my mistake. I'm like, well, that is something that you're using to then make life decisions, or something that you're using to draft important documents. It's not going to be correct. It just
yeah,
can't be correct and give you what you need to do.
yeah. Well, earlier on, you talked about we were talking about the price of how much it costs you to create a podcast episode, and did are they is it an agency or are they in members of like in-house?
Both. So we use an agency and we use an in-house, or rather, we use two agencies and then we use an in-house as well. So,
Okay. So like, what does the in-house do and what does the agent?
so the in-house helps with the distribution of the podcast and the distribution of the reels and distribution of that to the guests as well. Then the agencies help with one helps with the studio, and then one helps with the formatting. Sorry, with the editing of the podcast. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I guess you have a financial podcast, elevate your, and you're a financial expert. So I guess it's time for us to talk about,
Yes, let's do that.
is
That's
it
my favorite part.
is your podcast monetized?
No, so we haven't monetized that. The idea for that right now is to give back in terms of financial literacy. So we haven't monetized that. I said it's not a it's if I was to rate the amount of things that I would try to monetize before doing that, the podcasting will be very low on the list.
I guess the question I want to ask now is a lot of persons they kind of use their podcast monetization, but because it's not like direct, maybe they're not doing ads, they're not doing sponsorships, they don't count that. Oh, they're monetizing their podcast. But in actual sense, their podcast is actually like helping them get leads and conversion. So I guess the question I want to ask is, does your podcast drive leads to your business?
Yes. So, that was one of the reasons as well we did the podcast. So we definitely want leads to our clients pay high value, or at a high dollars. Think they should be paying to listen to the podcast, or
Yeah, yeah,
hence why it's free. because it's more about building that relationship and helping them to their final goals and objectives. So yes, it's definitely a lead generator for us, because people would see me, they'll hear me, they would then understand what I can do, and they're like, "Yep, I need someone like you, and yes, I'm comfortable with you. Let's go ahead and let's go ahead and help me manage my wealth, help me manage my money, and all that."
So I'm curious, how do you know that the lead is coming from the podcast?
Oh, we know where all our clients come from. Even part of the onboarding process, we ask our clients, where did you hear about us from? So they'll definitely tell us, that, okay, we heard your podcast, or we heard your name from a business professional or from the website. So everyone knows where they first heard of you, especially if you're not already a friend or a colleague. They would have heard from you from somewhere.
Yeah. I don't know if you can remember, but your podcast has been around for 8 months. How did you start getting leads from your podcast? Could you say, okay, you started attributing leads to say they're coming from the podcast?
Yeah, so the good thing about the podcast, right, it's interesting and it's good for people to understand, is probably leads started coming in, or inquiries and all that probably later on. So I'll say 3-4 months, we got a few questions, a few leads here and there. But the thing with that as well is, even for your current clients, they still need to learn a lot about you, or a lot about what you can help with. So that was beneficial to still send that to current clients to really understand. Okay,
Hey, just a quick break. If you enjoying the insights so far and want even more behind the scenes ideas, inspiration, and tools for growing your own podcast, join my email list at mypodcaststory.com/join. That is mypodcaststory.com/join. You get access to helpful resources, exclusive updates, and the kind of stuff I only share with my email subscribers. Whether you're starting out or already podcasting, there's something valuable waiting for you. Head over to mypodcaststory.com/join and subscribe. Now, back to the episode.
what is this concept I've been talking about? And yes, we spoke about this with you a year ago, 5 years ago. Now, just to solidify your understanding about that, this is what we've done a podcast on this topic. Listen to it.
Oh. Okay, so I guess we could call that lead nurture, lead education. I don't know what's the term.
Yeah, so look, I'll call it an educational process, and they're just a different touch point with your client. So it's definitely good to educate your clients onto the new strategies coming out. You might have spoken to a client about something 5 years ago, and they didn't want to do that then. Okay, but now by the time you speak to them about it again, and maybe show them through a podcast and they hear a client story, then it might resonate with them a lot better to say, okay, well, now is the time. I'm ready to actually do this.
Wow. Well, it's amazing how you the idea for the podcast came from a conference, and then you I guess you're writing the book already, and then you started the podcast. Now the podcast went for 8 months. Was there, like, you mentioned that your podcast comes out fortnight? Is there a reason behind choosing that specific?
Yeah, so we were doing weekly, but we decided to do fortnightly because, look, it was just taking a lot of time. So it was a cost-benefit analysis, just lots of time from me to, go there, set up, get guests in and all that. So we're like, look, we can still deliver as much value by doing it fortnightly, because the thing as well is, like, all those videos are posted before are still there, so there's still lots of content out there for people to watch and really understand.
Wow. Okay. Right. The episodes could be 16, or is it more? I'm just based on plus or minus. Since you said 8 months, I just said,
yeah.
is it more
So
than that?
look, one thing as well, I know we've recorded about 24, so we're always ahead of the recordings. So I don't know how many have been posted. I said my team help manage all that, just because I need to focus on a few.
Maybe I'll yeah. So I just show up and I record. Somebody takes care of the boring parts that I'm not really interested in. But in the meantime, I guess I have to.
Yeah, look, I'm guessing, is this your main source of revenue? Is this the main that you do?
Yeah, this is the main thing I do. So I have to spend my time doing it.
Correct. Yes.
It makes sense.
Initially you need to spend lots of time doing that. And where do you usually post your episodes to? YouTube and everywhere? Or?
Yeah, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and everywhere, and then the blog.
Okay, nice. Yeah. So look, for now, as later on, you'll definitely have a team, and then they can help you with all that.
I mean, it's all business decisions. Maybe when I get to a point where my time is I can afford to like pay more because I can afford to earn more doing something else. Then I can say, okay, someone should edit my work. Someone should do this. Someone should do this because I know that I can spend that time doing something that will earn me more. So I get it. It's business. So
Yes, and good on you. I think you actually chose a very good niche as well, the podcaster. I do like it, hence why I jumped on as well.
yeah. Because I was quite excited. I wanted to know. The funny thing about podcasting is that it's one of those platforms that it can be anything you want. Like look at you now. You're posting every 2 weeks, right? And
Mm.
you doing you can actually create and design the podcast the way you want it to. And yeah, you have that creative freedom, and you can do it the way you. Yeah, a lot of things they do 2 hour shows. Some persons do 5 minute show. Some persons they do every day. Some they even do seasons. Anything
Yeah,
you want to do. If you can think it, you can
yeah, exactly.
literally.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we've talked about business and we talked about monetization. It's a good thing that you're able to track where your leads are coming from. You get to know, oh yeah, the podcast is working. I'm getting some leads. I'm educating my clients and my customers from the podcast. So it makes business sense to keep on doing the podcast, other than the fact that I
Mm.
like doing the podcast. What I want to know now is I want us to go back to talk about personally, right? I'm guessing when you started this podcast, this was your first time doing a podcast.
I had jumped on other people's podcasts before, but I'd never hosted one until August last year. So or August, September. I should know my dates here. So I'd jumped on other people's podcasts, which was good. I think it was just a good way for people to know what we do and for me to communicate
Yeah.
that freely in the conversation.
Yeah, before you started your podcast, like how long have you been like guesting on other people's podcasts?
Before then, I think I jumped on just three people's podcasts.
Okay,
So
so you're
not too
yeah,
much.
more like in the baby stages.
Yeah,
You
pretty
went
much.
to a professional podcast. Is there a title?
No, it wasn't. Oh, we can make one. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm guessing by now you become an OG podcast guest. Like 8 months plus the three you did that first time. Probably by now you've reached maybe okay. Let me maybe 20 or 30 something like. Is it
When I started mine, I actually jumped on less other podcasts. So it's just recently that I started jumping on more of other people's podcasts as well. As I said, look, you learn a lot from other podcasters when you jump on viewers and at the same time people and expand
yeah.
your reach and networks.
So I guess my question now: how has podcasting touched you? Okay, not let me not use the word. How has podcasting impacted you personally, not just business wise? I know it's a business podcast, but personally,
Yeah.
like how has it worked?
I think the good thing about podcasting is you just learn to articulate yourself a lot better. And, if you are very confident doing it in front of a camera with another person and doing it over and over again, once you're then in, I'll just say business situation, it's a lot easier to say, okay, well, this is what I do, this is how I help people. And so that has been one of the personal benefits as well, just being able to articulate myself a lot better. What else? What other personal benefits? Yeah, maybe have deeper relationships as well. As I said, you might even bring people on that friends, colleagues, business associates, the way they grow, the way you ask them questions and maybe on the topic as well, you get to know them a lot better. So you get deeper relationships with those people.
Oh, I like it. Okay,
That's good.
okay. Anything peculiar or the now I know I'm not trying to discount the benefits you've gotten. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if I can pull a thread of something that is peculiar to you because most of the two benefits you've been is basically
Correct.
almost every podcaster that goes into podcasting gets to get they become good at speaking and they have if you interview guests they have deeper relationship with us. So is there
So is there
anything
anything else?
that is peculiar to you that you could say, this one, I think this is just my own?
Yeah, very, very good question. Ooh, to be honest, I can't think of anything. I'll say I was happy I really started the podcast before I published the book because the podcast was a good way to then tell people about the book, So personally, I think it was just a sense of achievement and just the ability to kind of almost publicize my own book as well. So, but other than the personal benefits, I honestly can't think of anything else. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever promote your podcast in?
Oh no, not really. Yeah. So I said it hasn't been huge focus for us. We haven't really promoted the podcast. I said because look, I rather promote how I help people, clients versus the podcast. So no, I haven't done that yet, but I should probably start doing doing that when I get the opportunity. So, but if people ask, I do tell them about it. But it's not a priority for me now to be talking a lot about the podcast because than the podcast.
Okay.
I think I'm more even focused on talking about the book, the 7 Basic Wealth Strategies, which people can get from Amazon or Audible versus the podcast.
Why do I feel that's probably I'm not the one asking the question. I feel like so
I think you're doing a good job.
no because I feel like I find it hard to believe that to tell anybody in real life, like someone like you're having a conversation with someone, they're like, oh yeah, I do have a podcast. It has never come up.
No. I guess maybe you misunderstood me there. What I was saying is I haven't actively said, okay, I'm going to speak to this person about my podcast. You know, if it comes up in conversation, it comes up.
Yeah.
You know, if I want them to be a guest, then I'll bring it up. And what I'm saying is there's certain other things that I would focus on when I'm speaking to people versus the podcast, just because I run a business. You know, I run a business where we help people manage their wealth, help people retire. So those are more front of mind for me than talking about the podcast.
Yeah.
But it's not like I've never spoken to anyone that I have a podcast. No, it does come up in conversation, but it's not a priority.
Yeah, you go to events, right? Are you a speaker have you ever like
So
spoken
I've spoken at a few events, yes. So
Okay.
and in those events, yes, if depending on what the events are, some of them have mentioned what I'm doing. I've mentioned the book, I've mentioned the podcast. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious. A couple of times you've mentioned that there are other things that you rather focus
Yes.
rather than talking about the podcast. I'm curious because I want you to understand why I'm seeing what I'm seeing so that you can get my perspective. I feel
sure.
and I would love for you to like tell me this stuff, but let me give you my perspective. I feel that a podcast, right? You know, when you go to an event and you speak, right? Not everybody is ready to say, I want to solve this problem now. I want to like hire you. I want to like, get your services out or whatever you do. I want to buy that thing right now. But for other persons, they might be like, yeah, this stuff, it looks interesting. I feel like I would need it in the future. But they just want to like, learn more, stay with you, stay in touch. So for me, other than the podcast, do you have something else that helps you do that?
Oh, sorry. When you say do that thing, do I have anything that helps me talk about my business? Sorry, I missed that.
Educate potential clients, like kind of like enlighten them, educate them, help them, give them knowledge to solve their problem before they eventually become clients.
Yeah, good question. So look, we do lots of things in the business. So for example, we have a blog. So there are lots of blogs out there. We have our website, So I rather send people to the website because in the website they can find everything they want. When I say everything, they can find the book, they can find the blog, they can find the podcasts. Okay, so to me, the website is the one place where they can get everything. And so if I was to send people there, then yes, I think that would be where they can find lots of information. We also do things like newsletters out to clients. When I say email newsletters, so all that as well are different things that we can get people to then understand a little bit about what we do. I think with the blog, it's a complementary benefit. It's not one of the sales or not one of the processes we have to get people to really understand. We are incorporating it as I get to understand what episodes people would like, especially the solo ones or the joint ones. And maybe, for example, my clients who are just building wealth or starting to build wealth and they want to buy their first home, I might send them the podcast where I sat down with the buyer's agent and the buyer's agent explained how they can help them buy a house. Okay, so we're learning to kind of build that funnel for different people and then help them get to where they want to get to.
Yeah, I don't know if you've noticed this, but probably maybe you said you've not been looking at the numbers, but one of the peculiar things about podcast listeners is that they are very, very loyal. Like, I mean, it's hard to grow a podcast, but if you get listeners, let's say you grow to about 100, you pretty much will be getting 100 listeners every time you release an episode. Let's say every week or every 2 weeks, right? So they are very loyal. They probably will stay with you as long as you are consistent. They'll stay with you for like 6-8 months. With you, unlike other platforms where sometimes on Instagram when you post, the algorithm is not happy with you that day. Even if you have 10,000 followers, maybe 200 persons will see your post. Or maybe YouTube, like you have 1 million followers, maybe 100,000 because maybe you need to optimize the title, the stuff is not viral. But on a podcast, once you post, it goes straight to them and they see it. You get same thing with like a newsletter. You get same thing with the newsletter. As long as you're not spammy, once you send something, it gets delivered to their email and they will see it. No algorithm is going to like influence that stuff. And that's one of the two things I like about a podcast and a newsletter. Now, of course, the blog is important, but But the thing about blog is that people have to go to the blog. People have to go to the website, right? It's more like usually most of it, I don't know, people do it, but usually people go to websites to do like, maybe they want to buy from you, they want to book his services, they want to, seal the deal, cover things
Yes.
up, and probably just sneak around and look at, okay, what's this guy doing? What's this stuff about? But they don't go to a blog to like consume content daily. But a newsletter, like people like you check their email almost every day. Especially if you're a professional, your business, like that's one of the things you do, your email,
Yeah.
the podcast too. So for me, it's just the fact, it's one of the ways to always be top of.
Hmm.
Because one of the
Yeah.
things I think recently I was reading a book about business is that people buy from not from the best necessarily, but from people they remember when they want to solve a problem. You get like you do
Yes.
financial
Correct.
planning, for example. Now, if I wanted to, maybe I saw you on the conference, we talked, and I was like, yeah, that's a great guy. But when I wanted to buy your services for financial, I don't remember you. Instead, I see a guy whose billboard is there. I'm like, oh yeah, this guy is financial. And after buying, I'm like, oh, that's true. That guy I interviewed on my podcast, he's not financial. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. So sorry. I bought this stuff already. So I want to be top of mind. So that eventually when they're like, oh, yeah, that's true, guy. So, we already built trust so that we're always, yeah, podcast pretty much does.
Yes. Yeah. I agree with you. So
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
benefit about the podcast,
I, I,
especially when people have subscribed to your platform or rather subscribe to whatever platform you're at and get notifications when things are released.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's good.
I mean, the business part of us always wants the platform that immediately closes deals, immediately gets us the money and everything. But when we are like talking about maybe getting people in the newsletter or people in the podcast, that's not exactly going to like close the deal immediately. But if I say, okay, our website, someone is going to buy, someone is going to understand. But usually, business we want to do the whole idea of business is I want to do business for the next 5, 10 years. We want to keep doing this, right? Except of course
Hmm.
we retire, but usually we want the business to outlive us and maybe we'll sell the business, exit the business. But we want to keep doing the business. But it's not something like we're okay, I'm just going to get quick bucks 3 months and then I'm going to disappear.
Yeah.
I mean, there
Yeah.
are people like that, but for most of us, it's something that we love doing. We want to keep doing for the next 5 to 10 years. We want to be there. Because what I'm saying is that recently, there's something
Yes.
I've been thinking about buying. For me, I was the marketer in me was just thinking that, wow, this company, I've been watching their stuff, I've been consuming their stuff for the past 4 years, and
Hmm.
now I've decided that now I actually need their product, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm going to buy them because now, like for the past 4 years, they've been showing me different videos about not necessarily about buying their stuff, but like helping me on different areas of my life at every point in time. And now I'm like, okay, so it's not a matter of okay, do I trust them? I already trust them, right? But it's not a matter of
Correct.
okay, I want to buy them, and the fact that they are still in my and I'm reminded of them. I'm like, okay, I'll buy their.
Yeah. Yeah. So and
Yeah,
that's the power of the staying front of mind and getting in as many people's faces as you can without being too intrusive. So yes, I agree with you.
yeah. And I mean, probably you might have experienced this when you're closing someone that has kind of like been educated about you, right? It's easier because then the questions they ask is different from someone who they probably don't know anything about you. They just saw you for the first time, and they're like, okay, it's way different from someone who has been like binge watching for the past 6 months. Now the questions they'll
Hmm.
be asking, and are you sure you know where you're at?
Exactly.
It's a be different stuff. Okay, how does the plan work? Okay, if I get this, it's more about the product rather than you being a trustworthy person or more like your credibility is different. And
Yeah. Trust has then been built over time, especially because
yeah,
you've gotten to really know you. And going back to one of your questions as to why podcasting versus blogs and all that is, they get that personal, so they
yeah,
get the closest thing to a personal interaction with a
exactly, yeah.
podcast versus anything else.
Yeah, I mean, people are jogging, they're listening to it, they're washing dishes, they're listening to it, they're relaxing out in the front yard, they're listening to it. So it's like the way people consume podcasts is way different from Instagram, TikTok, and all those platforms. And I mean, it's just built, and a lot of people are leveraging it. I mean, isn't that why a lot of people say let's guest on pods, and especially if you're selling high ticket pods, because we know that the people that listen to podcasts, it's just different. Yeah, you get one or two clients, it's way different from being on Instagram, and it's not like of course people are using Instagram to get leads for their business. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's the people listening to podcasts are just
Yeah,
yeah.
amazing.
Now that it's 8 months for your podcast, I'm curious to know what are the projections you have for your podcast.
Yeah, so I think for us is trying to build engagement now. So I'm really focusing with the team as to how we can build engagement. Because look, when I look at our content, I think our content is amazing. We talk about very relevant and detailed things that lots of people need to know about. So it's just kind of building that engagement with people. As I said, over time, that would then flow through to, people using our services, because I think we do high quality work. I always tell people I've been studying for the last 16 years, so that's lots of knowledge that we can really help people get to the goals and objectives.
Yeah.
So next few projects for us is just engagement, still getting lots of guests on. We usually get guests on face to face, so which has been really good as well.
Yeah, probably that's why it's pretty expensive. When you mentioned the cost earlier on, you need to have a studio. Unlike this one I'm doing now, where we're different. So you get pretty much local guests, like guests around in Australia. Yeah.
Yeah. So I haven't done any virtual one. I don't think I'll be doing that. We'll just see how we go to if that is a good idea to do later on or not.
Yeah, this strange thing, okay, it's not strange per se, because I've had a guest on this podcast who told me that he started his podcast just to close his. Yeah, like it's not like close them per se, but it was more like, okay, he was gonna get guests that were his target avatar, right? And then have them, by the time they will talk about the business stuff, and then at the end of the most of them, they will just like become his clients. Some of them, yeah, but usually it's just a pretty relaxed chat. And I was like, wow, how's that working out for you? I was like, yeah, it's doing well. I was like, wow, I never thought. And the fact that you are like a local, I don't know, I'm using local in a good word, but more like Australia. So what happens is that people who come on your podcast.
In Australia, local is fine. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. So I don't call you local chat, but when you invite guests, they see you pretty much when they ask them, do you know of a financial planner? Like, yeah, there's this dude I went on his podcast one time. The guy, he seems like a guy that knows his stuff, And then word of mouth, that's like the powerful source of business leads. Like it's old and it's always there, and we're always.
Yeah. So for us as well, we have only brought on business partners, so people who have done business with, and clients. So those are the people we usually bring on our podcast. We haven't really done anyone else. I'll probably just keep it that way as well. It's nice and intimate.
Yeah. You were talking about the projections, and I kind of
Yeah, so look, I was just saying projections is just for us to get more engagement, because I don't have the numbers. I can't give you a number.
Yeah,
if we get to a few million views and a few million followers, I'll be happy with that. But yep, look, I'm realistic as well in terms of what we're trying to do. So nothing.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've noticed about social media and all that is that it's not necessarily the person that has. Of course, having great content is good, but it's more getting seen. You understand? I've landed on content that the content is pretty good. For some reason, they did not sprinkle that magic dust of the platform on it to make it go, wow. Yeah, but when you watch the content, you listen to the content, you're like, wow, this stuff is good, right? Yeah. How come nobody's talking about it?
Yeah, you are right, and that's why getting stuff out there is very important.
Yeah. That's pretty much good. So probably, I think, I don't know where you're ranking up in your podcast. Yeah, I would be right. I could call your podcast a business podcast.
Yeah, definitely a business
podcast. Or is there a specific category? Like I'm trying to, on Apple Podcast, there's like category for the podcast, for your type of podcast. So I'm trying to see which category your podcast would be. Like, is it entrepreneurship, business?
If I was to guess, business, finance, or wealth, one of those.
Okay, finance. Okay, finance is more specific. Okay, but even the podcast covers both wealth, health, and relationships.
Yes, but it's definitely coming from a very finance perspective, and the whole idea about that is that, look, for you to have true wealth, you need good relationships and you need good health. So, but we mainly focus on just the wealth part, most of the times.
Yeah, I mean, if you could be the number one podcast on finance in Australia, that would be pretty exciting.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. I know we're definitely not, so but that's fine. It's all a work in progress.
I'm trying to think how big, like, what's the population of?
I think we're about 26 million, so it's quite small compared to Nigeria and other cities.
Like, I mean, it's possible. It's not the biggest podcast.
I don't think it's impossible, for sure.
It's just finance. That's where we're trying to focus. We're not going for the whole.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna take some time. Probably maybe 2-3 years, 4-5 years. Eventually, we're gonna get.
Yeah.
You have more leads that you can. Yeah,
Yes,
that's
for sure.
yeah, yeah. Wow, it's been great having you on the podcast. Just before we go, have what would you say to someone thinking of starting a podcast and if they've had wondering if it's right for them, had different tips, different advice. At the end of the day, they're even pretty much confused. More like, what advice do you have for the past?
Yeah, so I'll tell those people, as long as you have a goal in mind, just do it. I've forgotten the saying, but is along the lines of the world is there for those who can take it.
Yeah,
So if you have an idea, and even if you just enjoy speaking with people, just do it. And you can do it on a budget. As I said, I think ours, because it's face to face, it's a little bit more expensive. But from most people, you can just get your mic, get a video, and you're done. You're ready to podcast. So I'll say do it and just have a go. That's all.
yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We listeners learn more about you. You talked about your website. Would really love to know what those so that we can probably sneak around and see and take some peek on what's going.
Yeah, for sure. So we are on all platforms, which is good. So if you go on YouTube, we're called Elevate Your Wealth. Okay, and you
Okay.
type in Elevate Your Wealth, Victor Idoko, you definitely find me there. That's YouTube. On Instagram, the name of the business is CFV Advisory. Okay, and I have my own personal Instagram. It's I am Victor Idoko, and then we have TikTok as well, which is the same. I am Victor Idoko, and then we also have LinkedIn. So my personal LinkedIn is Victor Idoko. So if you go to any platform and just type in my name, I'm sure I'll come up there. And yeah, on all those platforms, we focus on, really helping getting information out there about wealth. And if you're in Australia, we can help you with financial planning. If you're outside Australia, we can do some online consults as well as to the ways you should think about things.
Yeah, I noticed you didn't mention the.
Oh yeah. Well, look, the thing with the website is I just don't mention in podcasts because I think podcasters generally go to a certain platform. But we
Yeah,
have a website as well. It's cfvadvisory.com.au or
yeah,
cfvservices.com.au.
yeah. I pretty much add everything to the show notes. But
Okay.
people at the end of the day, people will go for what they want to go for. So even if you
Exactly. Yeah.
talk about TikTok, Instagram, at the end of the day, people still go to podcast and search for Elevate Your Wealth and listen to the podcast. That's the one they.
Correct.
Yeah, but you just want to give
You're
them the
right.
options too.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Victor, for coming on the podcast.
No worries. It's been amazing, Wisdom. Thank you for having me
I'll-
on, and great. You're doing good things all the way from there in Nigeria. So keep at it.
That's it for today's episode of my podcast story. I am Wisdom Okonkwo, and I hope this conversation sparked new ideas and gave you a deeper look into the heart of podcasting. If you've loved this episode, consider supporting the show by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/wisdomhq. Every bit helps keep the stories going. And hey, don't forget to follow, rate, and share this podcast with another podcaster or creator who would find it helpful. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode.